My name is Victoria Lane. I'm 30 years old, and this is the story of the day I discovered the truth about my parents. They told me they wouldn't do anything for my wedding because we're saving money. That day, I stood in their kitchen in Fargo, North Dakota, staring at a crumpled receipt. It wasn't for groceries or something small. It was for a Tesla $88,888 bought for my sister. My heart sank, but I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just smiled. They thought I would stay quiet, play along, and keep pretending nothing was wrong while my sister basked in their favoritism. But the receipt in my hand changed everything. Later that evening, my sister rolled up in the shiny new car, laughing, completely unaware of the storm she had sparked. I said nothing, slipped the receipt into my pocket, and walked out into the cold night, my mind already racing with decisions. The next morning, they begged me, "Don't do this," but it was too late. My trust was gone, and I was ready to teach them a lesson they would never forget. Now I want to hear from you. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you confront them, walk away, or take another path? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to see how you would handle a betrayal like this. That afternoon, I went back to my parents' house to grab some paperwork. I was knee-deep in wedding plans, trying to stretch my savings to cover a venue in Fargo, North Dakota. My dress fitting was tomorrow, and I'd spent hours comparing caterers, hoping for a small reception I could afford alone. My parents' refusal to help stung, but I was determined to make it work. In their living room, I dug through a drawer for my birth certificate needed for the marriage license. That's when I found a pile of receipts tucked away like dirty secrets. A custom dining set for my sister Morgan, $5,000. A gold bracelet, $3,000. Plane tickets to Hawaii, $2,000. My hands shook. This was my money from the family account I'd poured thousands into. I'd been sending my parents $2,000 a month to keep their house running, believing it was for us all. My dad Thomas and my mom Susan swore they were saving money, but these receipts told a different story. They were funding Morgan's extravagance while I scrambled to pay for my own wedding. I drove to the bank, my mind racing with images of my unworn dress and unpaid venue deposit. The teller pulled up our joint account. My breath caught $12,000 withdrawn over 4 months, all for Morgan's purchases. Susan's signature was on every transaction. Thomas had approved them too. I stared at the screen, betrayal sinking in like a knife. Back at my apartment, I didn't cry. I acted. I logged into the bank app, my fingers steady as I canceled the monthly $2,000 transfers to their account. Confirm. Done. They'd notice soon, but I wasn't ready to confront them. I needed proof, something undeniable. I grabbed a notebook listing every receipt: dining set $5,000, bracelet $3,000, Hawaii trip $2,000. I snapped photos of each, saving them to my phone. The bank promised to email detailed statements by morning. I wasn't just angry, I was focused. This was about more than money. It was about being used. Morgan, clueless, kept flaunting her lifestyle. That night, her Instagram showed her posing with the gold bracelet captioned, "Treating myself." The dining set gleamed in the background of another post. She didn't know the money had stopped. My parents didn't either, but the silence wouldn't last. Every cent I'd saved was for my future, not Morgan's luxuries. At a coffee shop the next day, I skimmed through catering menus, pretending to focus while my mind churned. My parents thought they could keep lying, but I was building a case. Morgan's next post popped up, a selfie in a designer dress, probably bought with my money too. My jaw clenched. Each photo, each lie pushed me further. They'd taken my trust, my savings, my wedding. I was done letting them. A week later, my sister called me out of the blue. Morgan's voice chirped through the phone, all excitement, no shame. "Hey, I need $500 for a party," she said, to show off my new Tesla with friends. She went on about the rooftop bar she'd booked in Fargo, how she'd look stunning in the photos. I gripped my phone, my knuckles white. She was throwing a party to celebrate a car my money had paid for while I was cutting corners on my wedding budget. "I'm saving too," I said, my tone flat. "Good luck with the party." I hung up before she could reply. Morgan sounded confused but not suspicious. She didn't know I'd stopped the family's cash flow. That same day, I got a text from Susan. "We missed your transfer this month." She wrote all casual, like it was my mistake. "Everything okay?" I didn't respond. "Thomas sent one too. Call us, we need to talk." I swiped them away, pretending I was swamped with work. They were starting to feel the pinch just as I'd planned. At my desk, I was juggling wedding vendors, florists, photographers, a DJ, all on my own dime. Every call reminded me of their betrayal. They'd left me to fend for myself while Morgan partied. My resolve hardened. That night, Morgan's Instagram lit up. A post showed her at the rooftop bar posing with friends, the Tesla parked below like a trophy. "Best night ever," the caption read. My stomach churned. She was living it up, oblivious to the hole she'd dug with my savings. I scrolled through the photos, her laughing, clinking glasses, wearing a dress I'd bet was another gift from my parents. I didn't comment or like the post. I just stared, letting the anger fuel me. They thought they could keep using me, but I was done being their bank. The next morning, I met with a lawyer in Fargo. The house my parents lived in, our family's anchor, was legally mine, left to me in my grandmother's will. I'd let them stay there thinking we were a team. But now I saw the truth. They'd used my trust to fund Morgan's lifestyle. The lawyer laid out my options. I could start the process to reclaim full control of the property. It wasn't simple paperwork, notices, maybe even eviction if they fought back. But it was possible. I nodded, calm but certain. "Let's do it," I said. I wasn't ready to pull the trigger yet, but I wanted everything in place. Back at my apartment, I pulled out my notebook, adding Morgan's call to my list of evidence. $500 for a party on top of the Tesla, the furniture, the jewelry. I checked my email. The bank statements had arrived, detailing every withdrawal Susan and Thomas had made. Thousands of dollars, all for Morgan. I saved the files, my hands steady. At a wedding dress fitting that afternoon, I stood in front of the mirror, the white gown feeling heavier than it should. The seamstress asked if I was okay. I forced a smile, said I was fine. But inside, I was mapping out my next steps. Morgan's party photos kept flashing in my mind, each one a reminder of their lies. I didn't confront them. Not yet. Susan sent another text, more urgent. "Victoria, we really need that money." Thomas called, leaving a voicemail I didn't play. I was too busy calling the bank again, ensuring my accounts were locked down. Morgan's Instagram posted another story, a video of her driving the Tesla, music blaring, friends cheering. She had no clue the ground was shifting under her. My parents were starting to panic, but I stayed silent, letting them sweat. The house, the money, their whole world, it was all tied to me. And I was ready to take it back. One evening, I got a text from my mom. Susan's message popped up on my phone as I sat at my kitchen table in Fargo, North Dakota, sorting through wedding invoices. "Victoria, the Tesla was a misunderstanding," she wrote. "We need your help to keep things together. Please send the money again." Her words dripped with fake remorse, like she thought a quick apology would erase years of lies. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. No reply. Silence was my weapon now, and I'd let them feel it. They'd been living off my $2,000 monthly transfers for too long, and I wasn't going back. The next morning, Thomas called. His voice was sharp, accusing. "You're being selfish, Victoria," he said. "You're abandoning your family over a car. We raised you better." I gripped the phone, my pulse racing. He didn't mention the furniture, the jewelry, or the trips they'd funded for Morgan, just the Tesla, as if that was the only betrayal. "I'm busy," I said, cutting him off. "Figure it out." I hung up, my hands shaking but my resolve firm. Thomas thought he could guilt me into submission, but I wasn't the obedient daughter anymore. Their panic was growing, and I wanted it to. That afternoon, my best friend Stacy Bennett called. She's a designer, sharp and loyal, and her voice was tense. Victoria, I heard something you need to know, she said. My heart sank as she explained Thomas and Susan had used my identity to take out a $10,000 loan from a Fargo bank, all to cover Morgan's expenses. Stacy had overheard a mutual friend mention it at a coffee shop, piecing it together from bank gossip. I felt like I'd been punched. Not only had they drained my savings, but they'd also stolen my name for her. I thanked Stacy, my voice steady, despite the rage boiling inside. I drove to the bank that same day, clutching my notebook of evidence, receipts, bank statements, everything I'd collected. The manager listened as I laid it all out: the withdrawals for Morgan's luxuries, the canceled transfers, and now this loan. I showed my ID proving it was my name on their paperwork. They didn't have my permission, I said, my tone cold. The manager nodded, pulling up the account. The loan was recent, $10,000 with Susan's signature and Thomas's approval. I demanded they freeze the transactions. We'll investigate, she promised, but you'll need to file a fraud report. I agreed, signing the forms, my pen steady. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was theft, plain and simple. Back at my apartment, I sat with Stacy over coffee, my mind racing. She pushed a plate of pastries my way, trying to lighten the mood, but I barely touched them. They've crossed a line, she said, her eyes fierce. I nodded, flipping through my notebook. The loan details were there alongside the earlier receipts. I was building a case not just to protect myself but to make them pay. Susan sent another text that night. Please, Victoria, we're struggling. I didn't respond. Thomas left a voicemail, his tone softer but still manipulative. We're family, don't do this. I deleted it without listening to the end. The next day, I called a lawyer recommended by the bank. We met at his office, a small space downtown. I laid out everything: the Tesla, the furniture, the loan, my name on their lies. He jotted notes, his face grim. Identity theft is serious, he said. You've got a strong case, but it'll take time. I didn't care how long it took. I handed over my evidence, every receipt and statement, and told him to start the process. My wedding plans were on hold, vendors' unpaid dress fittings postponed, but I wasn't broken. I was angry, and that anger kept me sharp. The next morning, my Aunt Ellen Lane showed up at my office. She walked into the accounting firm, her teacher's cardigan and stern expression out of place among the spreadsheets and calculators. Victoria, we need to talk, she said, sitting across from me. Ellen, my mom's older sister, had always been the family peacemaker. She leaned forward, her voice soft but firm. You're being too hard on Susan and Thomas. They're struggling. Can't you work this out? I set my pen down, my jaw tight. She didn't know the half of it, but I wasn't surprised she'd try to fix things. That's what Ellen did. I leaned back, crossing my arms. They used my money for years, Ellen, I said, my tone sharp. Tens of thousands for Morgan's Tesla, her furniture, her trips, her jewelry. They took out a loan in my name. They didn't care about my wedding, my life. Ellen's eyes widened, but she tried to interrupt, saying they'd made mistakes but loved me. I cut her off. They don't get to play victims. I'm done. I told her about the receipts, the bank statements, the $10,000 loan they'd forged. Ellen's face fell, but she still pleaded. Their family, she said. I shook my head. Not anymore. I had no obligation to a family that betrayed me. That afternoon, I met my lawyer at his downtown office. The house my parents lived in, left to me in my grandmother's will, was legally mine. I'd let them stay there, thinking we shared it as a family. But after their lies, I wanted it back. The lawyer pulled out the deed confirming my ownership. We can issue a notice to vacate, he said, outlining the steps: 30 days to comply or we'd escalate to eviction. I nodded, my voice steady. Send it. The notice went out that day, addressed to Thomas and Susan. They'd have to leave the house they'd taken for granted. By the end of the week, I got a call from a realtor friend. Thomas and Susan had signed a lease for a small apartment on the edge of Fargo. No more spacious house, no more of my money to prop them up. They'd moved out quietly, no calls, no texts. I drove by the house one evening, seeing it empty, the windows dark. My chest tightened, not with guilt, but with a strange relief. They'd relied on me for years, but I'd cut that cord. They were on their own now, scraping by without my support. Morgan was feeling it too. Without Thomas and Susan's handouts, her lavish lifestyle started to crack. I saw it on her Instagram, though she tried to hide it. A post about downsizing showed her selling that gold bracelet she'd flaunted. Another mentioned tight budgets with a photo of her in a plain sweater, no designer tags. She'd called a creditor, I heard through a mutual friend, begging to defer payments on her credit card bills. The Tesla was still hers for now, but maintenance costs were piling up. Morgan wasn't used to paying her own way, and it showed. Her posts grew quieter, less flashy as reality sank in. I didn't reach out. My focus was elsewhere, reclaiming my life. At the office, I sorted through wedding plans still on hold, but not abandoned. I called a vendor to renegotiate a deposit, my voice calm, despite the chaos. My lawyer sent updates. The house was officially under my control, and I could sell or keep it. I hadn't decided yet, but the power was mine. Ellen called once more, asking me to reconsider, to talk to Susan. I declined, polite but firm. They made their choices, I said. She didn't push further. Morgan's latest post caught my eye that night, a vague caption about tough times with a selfie in her apartment, the fancy furniture gone. I didn't feel sorry for her. Every bill she struggled to pay was a consequence of their greed. Thomas and Susan's new apartment was a far cry from the house I'd funded. They'd built their world on my trust, and I'd torn it down. I closed my laptop, my resolve unshaken. This wasn't over, but I was in control now, and that was enough. A month later, my colleague Brenda Foster called me from the office. Her voice was urgent, cutting through the hum of the accounting firm. "Victoria, you need to see this," she said. Brenda, a sharp-eyed accountant, had stumbled across documents showing my parents trying to sell a plot of land. I owned a small lot in Fargo, inherited from my grandmother, alongside the house. The paperwork was forged, with my signature faked to transfer the deed. My blood ran cold. They hadn't just stolen my money, they were now trying to sell my property behind my back. I met Brenda at her desk, where she spread out the evidence: a contract with a local realtor, my name, scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting, and emails between Thomas and a buyer. I caught it while auditing a client's portfolio. Brenda explained, her fingers tapping nervously. The lot, worth $30,000, was a piece of my future I'd planned to use for my wedding or savings. I thanked her, my voice steady but my mind racing. This wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. I grabbed the documents, adding them to my growing file of evidence: receipts, bank statements, the loan they'd taken in my name. That afternoon, I called my lawyer. We met at his office, where I laid out the new findings. "This is serious," he said, flipping through the forged contract. "We need to report this to the police." I agreed, and we drove to the Fargo Police Department. I handed over everything: Brenda's documents, the earlier receipts for Morgan's luxuries, the bank statements showing their withdrawals, and the $10,000 loan they'd forged. The officer took my statement, his face grim. "We'll open an investigation," he said. "This looks like clear-cut fraud." I nodded, feeling a weight lift. Thomas and Susan would face consequences now, not just from me, but from the law. Word spread fast in Fargo's tight-knit real estate community. By the next day, whispers about Thomas and Susan's shady deal were circulating. A realtor friend texted me, "Your parents' names are mud around here. Their reputation, once respectable, was crumbling. They'd been active in local property circles, but now brokers avoided them, and their calls went unanswered." The investigation was public enough to taint their standing, and I heard they were dodging questions at community events. They were cornered, facing legal trouble that could mean fines or worse if the fraud charges stuck. Morgan was hit hard too. The bank tied to the loan Thomas and Susan had taken in my name moved to repossess her Tesla. I got the news from a mutual friend who saw the car towed from Morgan's apartment complex. She'd traded it for a used sedan, a far cry from the flashy ride she'd bragged about. Her Instagram went silent for days. Then a post appeared, a selfie in her new car captioned, "New beginnings." No glitz, no glamour. She was drowning in bills, unable to rely on our parents' handouts anymore. The maintenance cost, the credit card debts, she was on her own, and it showed. Susan sent me a text that week, "Victoria, please, we're sorry. Let's talk." Thomas followed with a voicemail, his voice desperate. "We didn't mean for this. Don't ruin us." Morgan even messaged asking for a small loan to cover her rent. I didn't reply to any of them. My phone buzzed with their pleas, but I swiped them away, focusing on my work. At the office, I reviewed wedding budgets, trying to salvage what I could. A vendor called, offering a discount if I paid up front. I took it, feeling a spark of hope. My life was moving forward, even if theirs was falling apart. I met Brenda for coffee later, thanking her again. She waved it off, saying, "You'd have done the same." But her find had been a game-changer, exposing Thomas and Susan's final betrayal. The lawyer called with updates. The police had questioned them, and the forged documents were under review. I felt no guilt, only clarity. They'd tried to take everything, my money, my name, my land. But I'd fought back, and I was winning. My wedding was still on hold, but I was rebuilding piece by piece while they faced the wreckage of their choices. By spring, I had moved to Bismarck. My fiancé and I settled into a cozy 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the Missouri River, a fresh start after the turmoil in Fargo. We'd packed up together, hauling boxes and furniture, laughing as we arranged our new space. I shifted to remote accounting work, managing client books from a desk by the window, while he commuted to his job nearby. The quiet of Bismarck felt like a reset, far from the family drama that had drained me. Our wedding was still on track. No delays, no doubts. And we were saving together, determined to make it our own. One evening, as we unpacked the last of our dishes, my cousin Kyle Lane called. He's an engineer, always straightforward, and his tone carried a mix of concern and news. "Your parents are in rough shape," he said. Thomas and Susan, stuck in their cramped Fargo apartment, were drowning in debt. Kyle had heard from a family friend that they were late on rent, juggling utility bills and fending off debt collectors. The fraud investigation from their attempt to sell my land had locked their finances, leaving them scrambling. I set a plate down my face, calm. "They chose this," I told him. Kyle didn't argue, just moved on to talk about his latest project. Morgan texted me that week, her message pleading, "Can you send $500? I'm barely getting by." She mentioned rent, car payments, a sob story about her struggles. I stared at the screen, my fiancé glancing over my shoulder. I'd already told her she was on her own after she lost her Tesla, and this was no different. "I'm not your bank," I typed back, sharp and final. "Handle it yourself." I blocked her number, my fingers steady. My fiancé squeezed my hand, a silent nod of support. Thomas, Susan, Morgan. They were no longer my burden. I was done. That night, I started a blog. Sitting in our new living room, the river sparkling outside, I wrote about my family's betrayal. The money they took, the loan. They forged the land they tried to sell. I kept their names out, but the story flowed, a daughter used by her family, fighting to reclaim her future. I posted it anonymously, expecting little. By morning, comments poured in. People shared their own experiences of family greed, thanking me for my honesty. The blog spread across social media, and a Bismarck news outlet emailed about a feature. I declined, but the online support felt like a lifeline. I wasn't just a victim, I was heard. My fiancé read the blog one night, his eyes warm. "You're incredible," he said, pulling me close. I smiled, feeling lighter. We kept planning our wedding, finalizing details with a smaller budget but growing excitement. A Bismarck venue offered a discount, and we booked it, choosing simple decor to match our vision. I kept writing, posting about moving forward, finding strength. The online community grew with messages from strangers who'd faced similar betrayals. It wasn't about settling scores anymore. It was about rebuilding, about owning my story. Kyle called again, updating me on Thomas and Susan. They'd taken low-wage jobs, Susan at a retail store, Thomas at a warehouse. Their Fargo social circle had cut them off after the fraud scandal. Morgan was working extra hours at her marketing job, barely covering her bills. I didn't ask for more, didn't need to know. My life was here in Bismarck with my fiancé by my side. We hung photos in our apartment, planned our honeymoon, and laughed over dinner. The blog connected me to others who understood, and that was enough. I was no longer the daughter who gave everything. I was building a life that was mine. One quiet evening, Morgan showed up at my door. The Bismarck apartment was warm with the glow of string lights, my husband cooking dinner in the kitchen. She stood there, her face pale, no trace of the confidence she'd once flaunted. "I was wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "I took advantage of Mom and Dad's money, your money. Please give me a chance to make it right." Her eyes searched mine, desperate for forgiveness. I stood silent, my arms crossed. The weight of her words hung heavy, but I felt no urge to respond. My life was here now, and she wasn't part of it. I closed the door without a word, turning back to my husband. He glanced up from the stove, his expression calm but knowing. We'd built a home together in Bismarck, our 2-bedroom apartment, a haven of peace after the chaos of Fargo. My remote accounting work kept me busy, balancing client books from my desk by the Missouri River. Our wedding had gone ahead as planned, simple but perfect, with a small ceremony under Bismarck's spring sky. I was free not just from my family's demands, but from the guilt they'd tried to chain me with. Morgan's plea didn't change that. Word about Thomas and Susan trickled in through distant relatives. Fargo's community had turned its back on them. The fraud scandal first, the loan in my name, then the forged land sale had stripped their reputation bare. They lived in their cramped apartment, buried in debt, with no assets left. Susan worked long shifts at a retail store. Thomas hauled boxes at a warehouse, but their bills kept piling up. Neighbors who once invited them to barbecues now avoided their calls. Their world built on my money and lies had collapsed, and I felt no pity. Morgan's visit lingered in my mind, but not for long. I didn't owe her a second chance. She'd made her choices just as Thomas and Susan had. My focus was my life now, my husband, my work, my freedom. We spent evenings planning a summer trip, laughing over travel brochures. I poured my energy into my blog, which had grown beyond what I'd imagined. Thousands followed my story, leaving comments about their own struggles with family betrayal. I wrote about the years of financial abuse, the strength it took to walk away. Each post felt like shedding another layer of the past. One night, as my husband and I sat on our balcony, I drafted a final blog post. I reflected on what I'd learned. Standing up for myself meant saying no, even to family. It meant protecting my finances, my heart, my future. I'd been their bank, their doormat, but I'd reclaimed my worth. The independence I'd fought for in Bismarck, in my marriage, in my work, was my victory. I thanked my readers for their support, for sharing their stories, for reminding me I wasn't alone. "Tell me your thoughts in the comments," I wrote. "Let's keep talking about knowing our value." The post went live and responses flooded in. People shared how they'd set boundaries, cut off toxic relatives, found their own paths. A woman from Ohio wrote about leaving her manipulative parents. A man in Texas thanked me for inspiring him to protect his savings. My husband read the comments with me, his arm around my shoulders. "You're making a difference," he said. I nodded, feeling a quiet pride. My story wasn't just mine anymore. It was a beacon for others. Morgan sent a letter a week later, another plea for reconciliation. I set it aside unopened. Thomas and Susan's names faded from my inbox, their voicemails deleted, unheard. My life was full: client meetings, weekend hikes with my husband, new posts for my blog. Bismarck's calm streets, its wide river, its open skies mirrored the space I'd carved out for myself. I'd learned to guard my worth, to build a life that no one could take. To my readers, I say this: you're worth more than their demands. Stand up, walk away, and find your freedom.